Hi, and welcome to How I Made It. My name is Alice Weightman. I'm the CEO of Hanson Search, an international headhunting business specialising in marketing and communications. Throughout my journey as a headhunter, I've met some really inspiring people. And like many of us, I've wondered, how did you get there? Well, this podcast will attempt to answer that very question. Hi, I'm here today with Jonathan Hughes, CEO of Golin.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thank you. Well, thanks so much indeed for joining us this morning.
No worries.
Keen, obviously, to explore your career and find out really how you made it to the top in your industry. Obviously, CEO of Golin, but you've had an extensive career both in the UK and internationally.
That's right.
So what really got you into PR initially?
Well, it wasn't a deliberate path. I think it's quite a common story. I kind of found and fumbled my way into the industry. I was quite a techie person way back when, quite geeky, and I was kind of starting in sales for a software company. I was kind of good at that, but what became apparent was I was actually quite better at, or much better at talking about it. So I then moved into like pre-sales, so going to talk to clients about, you know, what this amazing software was going to do for them and so on and so forth. And then from there I got into kind of marketing, and then my marketing manager said, look, we need to do some press, and can you head down to London, go meet these magazines and see if we can get some coverage. And I said, yeah, sure. And I loved it, and then that was kind of the start. And so then, I decided, right, well, this is fun, and I think I'm enjoying it and seem to be quite good at it. So then I went and joined an agency, and joined Ketchum. Was my first agency job way back when, and then from there, went from there to what was Miller Shandwick and Weber Shandwick and Golin. That's when I got there.
And so you've obviously had a extensive international agency career working for some global businesses. Was that a sort of a choice that you made rather than looking at the boutiques, or
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that. It was just kind of the way the opportunities presented themselves. So again, I started working at Ketchum in the technology practice, and yes, that was an international agency, but it just happened to be the agency that I really liked at the time and had some great clients. And then I guess the international thing came primarily when I started working for Oracle. So we pitched the business and went, and I worked for Oracle for 12 years in total before I went to Asia. And that was an international account. Started as kind of UK, grew to be EMEA, and then extended out. And like most, I think, people who have an international career, it's usually on the back of a client. You get to travel the world, you get to experience things, and that's where you get to dip your toes in that international water. So there was not a deliberate plan that I need to work in this market because I want to travel and want to do these things. That's just the way it went. Yeah. Yes. And London's great for that, right? I mean, it's a great international hub. So obviously the opportunities present themselves, so you've just got to be able to take them when they come up.
Absolutely. So you had a long stint in Asia. Do you think that it's important for someone in their career to have that international experience?
I found it really useful. It's always a little bit frightening, when you think about, I had a family, so this wasn't just me, upping sticks and moving across the world. It was, wow, taking the whole family with me. And that's a little bit frightening. But it's actually probably one of the best things I've ever done. I left London here in the end of 2012. The London office, big office, we built it right up. And then I was going into a market where I did not know the market. I was not a native, I was not a national, and that's just Hong Kong, let alone working, with clients in India, in Singapore, in China, a little bit in Japan. These are cultures that you don't know, and so navigating those was a brilliant learning curve. I made a load of mistakes, some awful mistakes, but that's kind of how you learn. It's the best intentions, and you kind of, you fine tune. But that was a whole new learning experience, which I don't think I would have had if I'd stayed here in London at that particular time. So, and I made a load of great friends.
And so what led you back to London, obviously enjoying Hong Kong? And
Hong Kong's a fairly transient place, so several things happened. A lot of it was a family decision. So my eldest is now 11, so it's kind of senior school time and thinking about that, and we wanted my kids to be educated back in the UK, so that was a big pull as well. And so, and again, taking on a more global role, with the firm. Again, it's difficult to be in Asia, and especially when so much of our business is based in North America, so much of the management team is in North America. Being 12 hours apart is tough. So it was kind of the right time for a whole host of reasons. But best, nearly 6 years of my life, I think, a real refresher, re-energizer, I think.
So obviously a lot's probably developed in the world of PR and communication since you started out. If you were to sort of give yourself career advice as your 20-year-old self getting into the industry, what would that advice be?
Go be a banker. I think 20 years from 1990, 20 years being in banking would have done well. Look, I think back then, I think the advice I would give myself would be have the courage to kind of move around until you find the thing that you really enjoy, and have that courage. That stage in your career, it's all very fresh and very new, and you're on that ladder, and you're just always looking for that next promotion. 12 months in, you're going to have a chat with your boss and try and get a promotion, and all that stuff, and it feels very front and centre. And if I look back now, I'm like, wow, your time scales change. So, for example, I decided to take a career break for 6 months. So I was a director at Weber Shandwick in the technology practice, running Oracle, as I kind of mentioned. And, my now wife and I decided we never really had a break from university, just went straight into corporate life, if you will. And we were going to take 6 months off. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my God, 6 months, that is like career suicide. I mean, the thought of being 6 months behind your peers or what have you was just incredible. Now I look at myself saying 6 months kind of races by. But we just said, you know what, we're going to do it. And to kind of hell with the consequence. And a bit like the Hong Kong trip as well, it was kind of, wow, what are we doing here? This could be crazy. And it worked out really well. And so I think just having that courage sometimes when something is right and you need to change it up a bit, having that courage to change it up or walk away and do something different until you find that thing, I think is kind of important.
There's a lot of talk in the industry about sort of mentorship and sponsorship and helping people progress in their career. Yeah. Have you had anyone that's particularly inspired you and helped you sort of progress and to get to where you are?
I wouldn't say I've had a singular person, but I've had people along the way that have helped me and that I still keep in touch with and still call and say, what do you think of this? Or am I being a complete idiot about this? So I think at different stages of my career. So, when we first started here at kind of Weber Shandwick at the time, we had a boss, Harris Diamond, who now runs McCann Erickson. And he was just a great character. And I learned so much about him. He has a real singular client focus. He's very smart with the business, but it was all about the clients for him, and then just having that relentless focus on what are we doing for the clients. That was something that kind of really stuck with me. I also, had at the time two other bosses, which was Colin Byrne and David Brain, before David went to Edelman, and Colin obviously carried on Weber. They had very different management styles, but again, very smart. I learned a lot from those guys, and I'm still in touch with them as well, and I speak to them if I have a need, and that so on and so forth. So that was good. And then more recently, I think kind of Fred Cook, who has been my boss at Golin. He a very different character again, very different management style, but very much a consensus builder and very much an agent for change. Working on the whole G4 restructure that we did way back in 2012, I suppose it was, 11, 12. That was, big change for the agency that I was lucky to work with Fred as part of the team to drive that through. But that was very much Fred's vision. So seeing that, as a key thing to do and important if you're leading a business, having that vision, as well as being a consensus builder. And then Fred is a great consensus builder.
Yeah, I remember hearing him speak actually in an ICO conference in Milan.
Right.
And he talked very much about reverse mentorship.
Yeah.
He was one of the first to talk about that, and also the internship program that he implemented.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed with his sort of visionary and new, fresh thinking that he was bringing to the industry.
Yeah.
In terms of, we talked a bit about leadership. What do you think makes a successful leader in today's world in the communications industry?
I think just in the industry, the environment, it's adaptability right now. the pace of change in our industry is more intense than I've ever known it. So, having the ability to relook at things and say, okay, why are we doing it this way? Let's change it up, or to decide if you haven't, you need to move in a certain area. So, a couple of years ago, we were nowhere in data and analytics, really weren't. And so, I took that on and said, okay, we're going to get somewhere. Hired a great guy, Johnny Bentwood, who works for us now as our global head of data analytics, and we built that strategy and that whole capability, because that was, we knew we had to get smart in that space, and we weren't smart. So having that adaptability and that flexibility in this market, I think, is key. Also, then just more general qualities. With all that change and adaptability, you have to realise you're not going to know all the answers all the time, and that's okay. You've really got to know what the questions are, and then have a team or explain to people, look, I don't know the answer here, so let's figure it out. How are we going to move in this direction, or start this specialism, or build this capability? And so having that level of, vulnerability, or just saying that this, let's figure it out, but this is definitely what we need to do, I think is important. And then I find just being genuine and authentic, because people can sniff that out if you're not, especially if you're trying to, lead a team, whatever size of team, and if you don't really believe in it, or it's, it doesn't have your 100% backing, people will sniff that out in a second.
Absolutely. Golin is absolutely doing some great things in the field of diversity and promoting more diverse workforces. Yeah. The industry's still got a long way to go. How do you feel that businesses can help and create more diverse workforces? And I mean diversity from the broader sense. Sure.
It's interesting, and to be fair, a lot of the credit for the progress we've made in diversity in the London office in particular has to go to Bibby Hilton. This has been a real, passion point for her, and she's very active in this community, and again in diversity in the broadest possible sense. And I think also then what I was able to bring a little bit was that, again, coming back to Asia, being in Asia where you are in the minority and you don't understand the culture, gives you a slight different perspective. But I think diversity is no longer just a pet project. It really is a business imperative, and clients are demanding diverse teams, because they've got to represent the audience that they're trying to target. And so, I think what we've done in London, and we've still got a ways to go, so I don't want to make it sound like we're sorted. But we took some very decisive steps. First thing, we started taking steps. I think there's a lot of talk, and you just have to get on with it. There's no perfect plan here. Just start, however small, make it a priority, put it on your business action list, assign it to somebody, make it happen. So that would be probably step one I would do. Step two would be, look at your recruitment process. And again, that, speaking to you obviously as a recruitment professional, as a company, make requests of your recruitment professionals, set standards or targets. So I want to see 50% of the candidates that come for these roles, I need to be from diverse background, whether that's economically diverse, whether it's in terms of other levels of diversity. There's that process. When you are recruiting, think about how you recruit, not just where you recruit from, but how you recruit. Does it encourage people who may not be used to this industry? Is it the same people doing the recruiting all the time? Perhaps you should think about a panel so that there's no unconscious bias kind of creeping in, because it's natural. People tend to recruit people they know and dissimilar backgrounds, right? So how can you break that part up? And then I think the third part is the inclusion piece. And this is where a lot of, I think that people think, I've got to get diversity is about getting more candidates in. It's about keeping diverse candidates, and especially if they're in an environment where they may not have someone who looks like them or has the same beliefs or whatever it may be that they can look up to. How can you make them feel included? And that's where I think looking to other organisations and maybe looking to have mentorship outside of your company, if it's a smaller firm where you don't have that option, PRCA does some great stuff in this space. There's Elizabeth Bannuka and BME Pros. There's other organisations around there that you can kind of work with, but that's what we've done. And again, it's all credit really to Bibby.
Great, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's useful sharing those stories to help other businesses. Yeah. Again, another big topic in the industry at the moment is on sort of flexibility and the freelance workforce.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a big shift of people moving towards becoming freelancers, but then businesses also offering greater flexibility. What's your thoughts in terms of the future of work, and how do you maintain the company culture whilst people are working in a more flexible way?
Yeah, that is the $1 million question. And we have been quite progressive in terms of our employment policies here. I think a couple of things really, I'd say, is that, when you work in a creative industry, you do need, I find, to find a way to keep the physical team together, because that is where a lot of the ideas come from. That's where you hear something and it gives you an idea, or if you're listening about what's happening on a client, you're able to kind of monitor that. So that there are all sorts of technologies, of course, whether it's Teams or Slack or all those kind of great collaborative tools, but you kind of need to get that balance right, especially in the creative industry. And so that has been a big learning for us. It's not that you can't work remotely. Of course you can. You can work anywhere. But it's that hub, that heart, that energy, especially in a creative industry, that you've got to try and get that balance right. And also, I think for leaders to be present in the company as well, to get that balance right, because junior staff people want to come through, they want to learn, they want to learn from you, they want to see you and not just read your emails, so they want to see you in action, and it's all those hidden cues that that disappear if you're just at the end of a video link or you're just dialing in. So I think that's getting that balance right is important. And I think also then there's the whole thing around the client relationship, and that is changing a lot. The days of long 12-month retainers and all this kind of stuff really is disappearing, and it's a lot more project oriented. And that means that clients have to understand that you can't necessarily have that view of what the team is going to look like for the next 12 months, and you need to bring in resource that's kind of that is freelance or has a specialist skill for a particular period of time, and so on and so forth. So I think having an understanding that that's just the nature of the evolving relationship, and no, clients don't enjoy it when you have to tell them that such and such is leaving or what have you, but that's just the nature now of the relationship. So I think it's being grown up and helping reframe that conversation with clients is kind of a key part to that whole work dynamic. And then I think just setting some boundaries. I mean, I saw someone's footer on, I forget which company it was, which was, look, so like, I'm sending you this email at 11 o'clock, but I don't expect you to respond. And it's that kind of work culture as well. Of course we can work anywhere. We've all got our phones. We can do all that kind of stuff, but we do need boundaries. And it's on the client side as well as the agency side. The pressure is intense on both sides. So how can we put some boundaries in place that tries to prevent the burnout and the always on and the issues around mental health that leads to as well. So I think that's kind of, it's all kind of interlinked.
Yes, absolutely. And we've talked a lot about how changes that happened in the industry from data, the way people are working. Yeah. What do you see as the sort of major trends or challenges that the industry is going to face in the future, the next sort of 12 to 18 months?
I was talking about this yesterday, and just the change that I'd kind of seen, and I was telling a story. When I first started at Miller Shandwick, as it was before it became Weber Shandwick, it was like the hot tech shop in London at the time of the dot-com boom. And I was saying, we used to charge prospects £10,000 to pitch.
Wow.
I know, right? I know.
Wow.
But such was the supply and demand. There's a huge demand in those days for dot-coms. They all had 6 months to become famous and to become, lastminute.com or whatever, and to get the funding and what have you. And there were relatively few agencies in those days. Now, if you think about the equation, it's entirely flipped. There's a lot of supply in terms of agency services, and that's gotten even more acute as the ad agencies have kind of woken up, if you like, to the power of earned communications, what we've been doing for so many years. And so that competition is intense, and it's only going to get more intense. So I think that constant change and evolution is going to continue. So being adaptable is going to be a key thing there. But I think it's also then important to figure out where you sit in this environment, because if you're just sitting in a sea of sameness, a sea of just vanilla, then you are going to become under intense pressure in terms of pricing, in terms of whatever it is, because there's so much other choice, and if you won't do it, then someone else will. And I think you've got to figure out, therefore, moving forward in this kind of industry, what's your point of difference? What's your specialism? Is it a particular industry sector? Is it a particular way of working? You need to figure out what that is to try and be able to cope with all this change, and to know who your ideal clients are and who you want to recruit, and so on and so forth. So I think that's kind of the way the change is coming. But it's only going to get more intense. It's only going to get, and I think the role of technology is only going to increase.
Well, that leads me nicely onto my last question.
All right.
If there was one bit of tech that you couldn't live without, other than probably your phone, what would that be? It could be an app, it might be a bit of software.
I have a note-taking app, so I've used Evernote, and I use that a lot just to keep notes and to-do lists and things like that, and try and organise that as much as possible. So that's probably one in terms of the work kind of aspect. The other thing, in terms of more of the personal thing, was a couple of years ago, my wife bought me DJ lessons, and so I bought myself a set of decks, a bit of tech kit, and I can't say I could live without. I certainly could live without them, and probably my wife wishes I would live without them. But they're kind of permanently set up at home, and the kids mess around on them, and I mess around on them. I find that quite a good, just bit of escapism more than anything.
Absolutely. Great. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much indeed for sharing your insights in your career and the industry. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Well, thanks very much, and and wish you all the best, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Great.
That's it for this episode of How I Made It. For more great interviews like this, or information on how we recruit the best talent, please visit our website hansonsearch.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.